What's up, beautiful world? This is TNA, Top Notch Audio, and welcome to another episode of r/slash malicious compliance. Our first story will be, my washing machine isn't broken, your brain is. Followed by, you won't accept my card? Okay, see you soon. And then, lock the door if we arrive 5 minutes late? Okay. And finally, you need to check all of our food? Fine. If this is your first time listening, remember to hit that subscribe button on the bottom right hand corner. If this is not your first time, welcome back. Enjoy the stories. And this story is posted by u/fluffy-designer. My washing machine isn't broken, your brain is. I was reading another story on Reddit and I remembered something from years ago that would probably fit in here. Back when I was young and stupid, I dated an absolute donut of a man who had no concept of taking responsibility for his actions. This included him moving in with me after 3 dates by using my spare key while I was at work, hijacking my garage to store his boss's materials over Christmas without telling me, drinking heavily, and yelling at me constantly about problems he was having with the washing machine. Now, my washing machine came with me from my apartment when I moved, and I never had a single problem with it. So when he had came to me screaming about how it had shrunk all his shirts, I was very confused. He had ordered new shirts and put them in the wash, and I'd washed them and now none of them fit. After a full day of him calling me at work and harassing me about it, I discovered they sent him the wrong size. He never apologized. Here's where I finally had enough. He came to me at 10:30 on a Saturday morning with his cricket uniform and told me he was leaving for his game in half an hour and he needed a clean uniform. I reminded him that the minimum wash cycle on the machine was 35 minutes and I couldn't do anything about his dirty uniform. After he finished throwing a tantrum about how it hadn't been washed for 3 weeks, seriously, how do you wear the same uniform for 3 days in the hot sun and not notice that it hadn't been washed? He wore it for the 4th week. Another week passes and the uniform doesn't turn up in the laundry, so I let it go. The following Saturday, he comes in again half an hour before he has to leave, saying he needs his stuff washed. Now, this uniform had been sitting in his bag in the hot sun with 4 games worth of sweat and grass and dirt marinating in it, and it smells a bit rough. Sorry, buddy, nothing I can do. He leaves with his dirty uniform after throwing a tantrum. Another week later, it's still in his bag in the car in the hot sun. The car that he uses for work, that he drives daily, that he locks when he's not in it. I couldn't get the stupid clothes out even if I wanted to. Saturday morning rolls around and here he is with this effing uniform. I decide to implement malicious compliance, knowing that I haven't gotten enough time to dry it, and wash this stupid thing on the shortest cycle I can. He's not only running late, but his uniform is still heavily stained, smells terrible, and is soaking wet. He ends up wearing the wet uniform, leaves it in his car, and the crotch goes moldy. Yep, that was when I took him to a public place with lots of people and told him to get the F out of my house. Surprisingly, he left peacefully, although I had to throw out several boxes of his boss's stuff after almost 2 years of trying to get them to come and pick it up. And this story is posted by u/sibmy. You won't accept my card? Okay, see you soon. Yesterday I had to go get my diploma at college. Yay, 2020 class, what's up? On the way there, I remembered my spoiled 6-year-old brother demands sweets every time someone comes home. So, to avoid his tantrum and my mom yelling at me for not giving him anything, I decided to stop on my way back and buy him some candy. By the time I was back, everywhere was closed except for a Walmart and a little deli owned by an old neighborhood couple whom I'll call Boomer and Karen. So I decided to support our local community and whatnot. After standing on the socially distant line for a single chocolate bar, I finally got to the cashier, Karen, who refused to accept my card because the chocolate was like $2 and they only accept $30 plus on debit. Both her and Boomer, with an old fart thinking their smart smirk, then suggested I buy more stuff to match the value. I refused, so she started yelling at me for wasting her time and messing the store. Remember, I got a single chocolate bar. While she yelled her fat guts out, I saw a stand saying they were taking delivery orders through X app and little photos of different debit and credit cards. I had used it a few times already. I just looked at her, said, okay, and left. When I was out of there, I looked their store up, no minimum value and no delivery fee, so it was my time to smirk now. I waited a few minutes, ordered the darn chocolate, put the delivery address at a house a few numbers away, and waited there. Seeing Boomer trotting down the street in full protection gear with a single chocolate in a bag, look at me right under the delivery number he was looking for and stop on his tracks, the visible parts of his face getting redder and redder. Lovely. I extended my hand and said, "Thanks." He handed me the bag without a word. I watched as he walked back to his darn deli, taking mental notes to never go there again, then walked back home with a smile under my mask. This little game took almost 30 minutes, but the feeling of owning greedy boomers was worth it. So much for supporting the locals. And this next story is posted by u/Chromez. Lock the door if we arrive 5 minutes late? Okay. So this story is going to be very short, as it didn't happen to me, but to a fellow professor last year. Last year, the university I teach wasn't particularly strict on attendance. The only thing not attending would do is get you a call asking if you want to keep paying for the class at all, as you're not using it at all. There were no refunds, but they could sign you out midway through, so you didn't pay extra. Everything else was up to the teacher to control how they wanted attendance to affect their class. This one professor decided to be incredibly strict about it, and the students hated him for it. He would physically lock the door once 5 minutes have passed and would not open it again for any reason whatsoever. If you were 5 minutes late, that lesson was lost. Some students were sitting in the hallway and taking notes through the glass doors when that was an option. One day I arrived to teach my lesson and all the students are giggly and happy. It just so happened that the professor himself arrived 5 minutes late that day, and the students locked him out of the classroom for an entire hour. I suspect the professor was too embarrassed to ask for a key and having to admit why he was locked out. Needless to say, he never locked the doors again. And this next story is posted by u/NF Kappa B Alpha. You need to check all of our food? Fine. So this happened like 7 or 8 years ago when I was jobbing at a driving service while I was a student. The driving service was one for people with disabilities that could not drive or walk on their own. Our main office was in the building of a housing and working facility for disabled people. The two companies, our driver service and the housing facility, were loosely connected as they were both financed by the same organization. However, management-wise, they were clearly separated. We were about 15 drivers at this location, and we shared our lunch and social room with about 10 caretakers. Since our schedules were horribly organized, the drivers often had idle time, so the social room was where everybody hung around waiting for work. One day, my boss, call him Tim, brought cake to work because he became 60. The cake was enormous. Like a wedding cake could hide behind it twice. I can only imagine how expensive it must have been. At 9, every driver had eaten some pieces and there was still like 80% left of it, so Tom told the caretakers they should feel free to take some. Then Karen happened. She was something like the security inspector of the facility, so she had authority over the caretakers but no dealings with the driving service. Her job was to watch for potential hazards, organize the caretaker's schedule, and generally having an eye on everything happening. When she heard there was cake, she was furious. She and Tom couldn't stand each other, so she was always trying to ruin his day. In this particular instance, she claimed the cake was a health hazard as it contained cream and she could not verify whether the cooling chain was never broken during transport. So she threw it all away. Roughly 400 euros worth of food just thrown away. Needless to say, Tom was less than amused. He went extremely mad. He was usually a very calm and gentle man, and this was the only time that I ever heard him shouting at someone. Still, there was nothing he could do. Karen could basically declare anything a hazard and take action how she saw fit, and her higher-up didn't really care. To make matters worse, she doubled down and demanded that every food that was brought into the social room had to be inspected by her first. Cue malicious compliance. Obviously, all the drivers were mad at Karen for upsetting Tom and for throwing away a perfectly fine cake. So the next day, first thing in the morning, 15 drivers went to her office. Everyone with his lunch demanding she inspect it. It took her roughly 10 minutes looking at sandwiches and answering questions whether mayonnaise was too hazardous to be brought in. This went on for the whole week. Each day, our questions about hazardous foods becoming more dumb and degenerate. On Friday, it took her more than 2 hours to inspect our lunch, as we would collectively steal her time. Afternoon, she said she got the message and that sandwiches got a general okay and not to bother her with it anymore. Fine. The following week, we went out of our way to eat anything but sandwiches. Salads, cake, pretzels, normal lunch stuff. Every day there was a line in front of her office having their lunch checked, asking stupid questions whether this food was or was not too dangerous to enter the social room. Karen was losing her patience, becoming increasingly aggressive towards us, but still refused to apologize to Tom. Then, at the end of week 2 of food checking, Tom brought a bucket for lunch. When he entered Karen's office to have his lunch checked, like he did every day, and opened the lid of his lunch pot, the smell hit everyone in the vicinity like a brick to the face. Apparently, he had made some unholy mix of garlic, cream, pickles, and herring, which he called fish soup. It looked like what happens if you leave something dead in the sun for too long, all brownish and sluggy with some green specks in it, and it reeked twice as bad as it looked. Karen looked as if she would puke any moment, commanding him to remove this monstrosity from her office. Tom asked if she didn't want to check it, since he could imagine the cooling chain could have been broken during transport or sometime in the last 2 weeks. The lot of us drivers laughed so hard, I swear some nearly choked from laughter. This was roughly the time that Karen had to admit defeat. Food checking stopped immediately, and the following week Tom brought another cake. Oh man, those were 4 great stories. To hear the best stories of the week, click on the video in the top left-hand corner. To hear more Reddit stories all related to what you just heard, click on the video in the top right-hand corner. And if you have not already done so, click on the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner. Once again, this is TNA, Top Notch Audio. Thank you for listening and have yourself a great day.